Here is a basic guide to Dragoon in Dawntrail. For those of you who have played Dragoon before or played it at Endwalker, it will feel very similar. So we're going to start out with the single target GCD combo, which only has one notable change. So our first combo is True Thrust into Disemboweled, which upgrades now into Spiral Blow, giving us Power Surge, our 10% damage buff. Then we go into Chaotic Spring, which adds a dot to our enemy, then going into our rear positional Wheeling Thrust. Now normally we would go into Fang and Claw, but that is now upgraded into Drakesbane, a non-positional GCD. The second combo is True Thrust into Vorpal Thrust, which is now upgraded into Lance Barrage, and into Heaven's Thrust, followed into our flank positional Fang and Claw, finally ending with Drakesbane, once again a non-positional GCD. So please note, every single time you finish a combo here, your True Thrust will then become a Radiant Thrust, giving us one charge to Whirlwind Thrust. As you can see, it's the same looping rotation that Dragoon always has, and the only change here is going to be Drakesbane, where all you have to do is worry about your first combo, which will always be a rear positional, and your second combo will now always be a flank positional. No worrying about flip-flopping, and you'll have 4 GCDs in order to adjust. So the full combo will go True Thrust into Spiral Blow, into Chaotic Spring, Wheeling Thrust, Drakesbane, Radiant Thrust, Lance Barrage, Heaven's Thrust, Fang and Claw, and Drakesbane once again, and repeat. The AoE combo also goes unchanged with our Conal AoE Doom Spike into Sonic Thrust, another Cone AoE, which also grants Power Surge, ending with Corinthian Torment, a straight line AoE, and repeat. Upon completing a combo, Doom Spike will be upgraded into Dragon Fury, another line AoE, and this will also grant a charge to our Whirlwind Thrust. Onto our abilities, Dragoon only has one new ability called Winged Glide, with a 0 potency gap closer, which will have 2 charges on a 60-second cooldown. Then we have Piercing Talon, our ranged GCD, and once again we keep Backflip, which will send us backwards whatever direction we are pointing a set distance, and usually to our death. Onto our OGCDs now, which are all weavable. We are going to start out with High Jump, an attack that can be used at range on a 30-second cooldown. With the follow-up, Mirage Dive, another ranged attack which will have a 15-second window which you can use after using High Jump. Next is probably our most important OGCD in Gear Skogul, a ranged line attack on a 1-minute cooldown, which now gives us our Life of the Dragon. Life of the Dragon is a 15% personal damage buff for 20 seconds. Along with that, we get 3 charges of Nostrand, a ranged line attack, which we can use all 3 charges of in our 20-second window of Life of the Dragon. Next, we have everyone's favorite OGCD in Stardiver, a gap-closing jump dealing AoE damage, which can also only be used during Life of the Dragon, with a new follow-up attack, Starcrossed, also a large damaging AoE, which can be used 20 seconds after the usage of Stardiver. Then we have Dragonfire Dive, a gap-closing AoE jump on a 2-minute cooldown, with the new follow-up of Rise of the Dragon, a large AoE which can be used at range within 30 seconds of using Dragonfire Dive. Lastly, we have Whirlwind Thrust, a line AoE that requires 2 charges to use upon the completion of either your single target combo or your AoE combo. For the buffs, they remain the same, with Life Surge, which allows our next attack to crit, Lance Charge, which increases our personal damage by 10% for 20 seconds, and Battle Litany, everyone's favorite party-wide buff, which increases crit rate by 10% for 20 seconds. So let's go over what Dragoons are trying to do with the rotation before we break it all down. So the general idea is we want to keep our Power Surge buff up and our dot on the enemy as much as possible, while as landing as many of our OGCDs in our buff timers and Life of the Dragon phase. We're going to do this in such a way that we can set up our hard cooldowns of Lance Charge, Battle Litany, Gear Skogul, High Jump, and Dragonfire Dive to be used on cooldown. We're also trying to set it up so that we can use Life Surge and Whirlwind Thrust before they cap. Reminder, Whirlwind Thrust gets a charge every single time you complete your GCD combo, so use it before you get to your third Radiant Thrust. And Life Surge wants to be used almost exclusively with Drake's Bane or Heaven's Thrust, but you may have to use it on other GCDs in order to avoid overcapping. This allows us to have some flexibility with our other OGCDs of Nostrand, Rise of the Dragon, Star Cross, Mirage Dive, and Star Diver. Please note all of these, with the exception of Star Diver, can be double weave. One other thing to note is if you are using the action follow-up setting, which allows you to have multiple keybinds on single skills, such as Mirage Dive and High Jump. It is very hard to double weave these with each other, so plan your rotations accordingly. So our full rotation will go something like this. We're going to start out with True Thrust going into Spiral Blow with our OGCD of Lance Charge, then Chaotic Spring, and then we're going to pop our buffs with Battle Litany and Gear Skogul. Now that we're going into Life of the Dragon with all of our buffs up, we can go into our next GCD of Wheeling Thrust, High Jump, Life Surge into Drake's Bane. And we're going to follow up with Dragonfire Dive, Nostrand, into our first Radiant Thrust into Star Diver. This is the only OGCD we are going to weave here because we cannot double weave it. Then we're going into our second combo of Lance Barrage, Star Crossed into our second Life Surge, going into Heaven's Thrust, our second Nostrand with Rise of the Dragon, into our flank positional of Fang and Claw, followed up by our last charge of Nostrand, Mirage Dive, Drake's Bane, into our Radiant Thrust, and then we completed our charge of Whirlwind Thrust, so we will be using that, and the rotation will loop from there. With all that being said, if you do this correctly, this should set you up so that you can use your Battle Litany, Gear Skogul, Lance Charge, and Dragonfire Dive on cooldown. Once again, we're going to try to use our Life Surges with buffs up and on Drake's Bane or Heaven's Thrust exclusively, and you're going to be able to fill in with your OGCDs accordingly based off of your rotation. Now I hope that helps you get started with the basics of Dragoon and helps you learn and understand the class a little bit better. There are some optimization things that you'll have to learn along the way, but this is just a beginner guide in hopes of you getting started and getting acquainted with the class. If you want me to go and do a more advanced guide, or you have feedback on how I can improve on helping you learn other classes, please let me know down below. I'm trying to help out as much as possible and make as good as content for everyone as possible. But without all of the way, I hope you learn Dragoon. I hope you enjoy it. But as always, I hope you have a great day. Here's a basic guide to Dragoon in Dawntrail. It plays a lot like Endwalker, and I'm not going to waste any time, so let's get into the notable changes first. So, how do you always text me at the worst times? My mom, every single time. This is 8 recordings in a row that I've started and my mom's text me. Not just out of the blue. And they're all at different times. This is wild, dude. Oh, God.